Missile lock. Everything in the Russian cockpit turned red. The MiG-31 pilot was flying at Mach 2.8, nearly 3 times the speed of sound. But his $200 million fighter jet just went completely blind. What he didn't know, NATO had been tracking him in total silence for 12 minutes. 4 aircraft, 0 radar signatures. And this wasn't a warning mission. This was a trap. This blunder would destroy more than flying careers. It would embarrass an entire nation. The kind of failure that changes military doctrine at the highest levels, cut to hours earlier. 3 MiG-31 Foxhound interceptors launched from Chkalovsk Air Base, afterburners glowing, rocketing to 45,000 feet, banking toward the Baltic Sea. These crews believed they were untouchable. Their jets could outrun anything, outclimb anything. When they reached the target zone, they deliberately violated Estonian airspace, faking a navigation mistake. Transponders switched off. Tight, aggressive formation, a route calculated to provoke NATO. Test their response time. The Russian pilots knew they'd be monitored. That was expected. But here's what they missed. They completely misread why NATO was watching them. They figured they'd get the standard treatment, a radio warning, maybe some F-16 scrambling from Lithuania. Then they'd bank east, return home. Mission accomplished. That's why they cruised at 45,000 feet, relatively low for a MiG-31. They wanted NATO to spot them. They wanted the F-16 to respond. But they'd totally misjudged what NATO had planned. Look, the MiG-31 reaches Mach 2.83, climbs to 82,000 feet. F-16s can't match those numbers. F-16s top out around 50,000 feet. So the Russians believed they controlled the situation, even if NATO's ground defenses could reach them. Hitting a Mach 2.8 target at 25,000 meters, almost impossible. That's where their overconfidence came from. That's why they felt invincible, but that arrogance was about to destroy them. NATO's Combined Air Operations Center in Germany marked these 3 MiG-31s as priority targets the moment they lifted off. But the directive issued wasn't standard protocol. It wasn't scramble immediately. It was colder, more calculated. Let them violate our territory. Let them cross the line. Now you might assume that's weakness. Like NATO was afraid to act. Completely wrong. This was strategy. A perfect opportunity to do something far more damaging than just turning them around. The Russian formation penetrated deeper over the Gulf of Finland, north of Hiiumaa Island, deep into Estonian territory. 5 minutes elapsed, then 10. The pilots started laughing over comms. They interpreted NATO's silence as weakness. Their Zaslan M-Pisa radars scanned continuously. Nothing hostile, just commercial traffic, empty airspace. They assumed they were flying alone. But while they searched for threats, they'd already been marked, cataloged, targeted. They believed they were hunters. Truth? They were walking into an ambush they couldn't detect, and the trap was already closing. 80 kilometers southwest, 2 F-35As scrambled from Amari Air Base in Estonia. Italian F-35A, Lightning IIs on alert duty. They reached altitude, then disappeared electronically. Flying passive. No emissions, total silence. But their AN/APG-81 AESA radars continued operating, running in LPI mode, low probability of intercept, completely invisible to the MiG-31's legacy radar warning receivers. The F-35s cataloged every detail the Russians transmitted: speed, heading, heat emissions, creating a precision target file. And the Russian crews, completely unaware. Their systems detected nothing. The F-35s harvested intelligence, capturing every electromagnetic pulse the MiGs broadcast, radar emissions, data link traffic, radio communications, every frequency shift, every power variation, all recorded, analyzed, transmitted via AWACS to NATO, intelligence for immediate processing. This wasn't simple tracking. This was a surgical examination of Russia's digital fingerprint, documenting every electronic weakness. Meanwhile, additional assets moved into position. Dozens of kilometers west, 2 Swedish-manufactured JAS-39 Gripen-E fighters, pulling targeting information through Link 16 from the F-35s. These weren't ordinary Gripens, these were E variants, elite models. And here's what makes the Gripen-E dangerous. It was engineered specifically to counter one threat: Russian fighters. Its Raven ES-05A ESA radar, advanced jamming capabilities, network warfare integration. It could leverage every Allied sensor in the theater as its own detection system. the perfect Russian killer. Its objective? Jam the enemy into blindness before they detect you. Hunt them using networked intelligence. Vanish when necessary. The command transmitted from Germany. Single word, engage. Right when the Russian pilots were thinking this is way too simple, their instruments went haywire. The Zaslon M radar displays flooded with nonsense, interference, phantom targets, noise. Initially, they suspected equipment malfunction. Then their communications died, pure static. Seconds after the electronic assault started, their radar warning receivers began shrieking, louder than they'd ever experienced. Multiple threat locks. This wasn't malfunction. This was combat, electronic combat. They looked outside. 2 JAS-39 Gripen-E fighters, climbing toward their position. Wing pylons carrying Meteor and IRIST air-to-air missiles. Both Gripens activated their radars. All 3 MiGs locked simultaneously. The Gripen's electronic warfare systems destroyed the MiG-31's electronic vision. No radar, no communications, no awareness. By the time the Russians acquired visual contact, the Gripens had already established perfect firing geometry. Missile solutions active, total tactical ambush. Then their threat displays erupted again. F-35s. Now they weren't just blind and mute. They were surrounded, cornered. The 2 Gripen fighters positioned alongside the MiG-31s. Calm, controlled, like a routine training sortie. The Meteor missiles mounted beneath their wings pointed directly at the Russian aircraft. And here's the problem. The Meteor flies at Mach 4+. The MiG-31 had zero possibility of escape. The Swedish pilot's transmission cut through the emergency frequency. Ice cold, emotionless. Russian aircraft, you've been violating Estonian and NATO airspace for 12 minutes. Your electronic systems are compromised. Your radars are offline.
Russian fighter jets, you have been in Estonian and NATO airspace for 12 minutes. Your electronic systems are under our control. Your radars are inoperative.
Multiple missiles have locked your position. You have one option. Exit to Russian airspace immediately. This isn't a suggestion, it's a command.
Multiple missiles are locked on your position. You have one option. Return immediately to Russian airspace.
For those Russian pilots, every belief they'd trained on evaporated instantly. Their speed advantage? Meaningless. Their altitude superiority? Useless. Their advanced radars? Expensive scrap metal. They faced a force that had already annihilated them electronically, outmaneuvered them tactically, and now dominated them visually. The Russian flight commander understood the catastrophe immediately. They were outnumbered, outclassed, and totally unprepared for this warfare level. When they attempted contacting their ground control, the response came instantly. Abort. Abort now. 3 MiG-31s turned hard, like animals running from danger. The Gripen fighters escorted them to the border, ensuring they departed. The F-35s continued recording every desperate maneuver, every radio attempt, following them like shadows. Not one shot fired, but this was humiliation more devastating than any missile strike. NATO hadn't just defended territory. It had delivered a 12-minute masterclass, demonstrating exactly how powerless even advanced interceptors are against modern networked warfare. The Russian pilots returned to base carrying more than a mission debrief. They brought back the brutal reality of how outdated their systems had become. Following this event, the protocols changed. Any future deliberate violation of NATO airspace would trigger lethal response under specific criteria. Estonia, Poland, Sweden, Germany all endorsed it. Even President Trump clarified his position.
I don't love it. I don't love it. I don't like it when that happens.
So here's the critical question. Could NATO fighters actually destroy a MiG-31? On paper, the MiG-31 Foxhound looks intimidating. Service ceiling exceeding 80,000 feet, roughly 25 kilometers. Speed of Mach 2.83, nearly triple the speed of sound. It's the fastest operational fighter flying today. So how do you destroy something moving that fast? We witnessed it get neutralized at lower altitude on September 19th. Advanced jamming, networked data fusion, 4th and 5th generation fighters coordinating. The MiG-31's speed became irrelevant. But what about at extreme altitude? In its natural environment, here's the reality. What made it powerful also made it vulnerable. Listen, the MiG-31 wasn't designed for dogfighting. It's a massive, aerodynamically blunt interceptor, a missile carrier. Its design philosophy is simple. Fly straight, fly fast. Intercept American bombers. At Mach 2.8 and 80,000 feet, This aircraft's turn radius spans tens of kilometers. Attempt a hard maneuver? The airframe would either fracture structurally or the engines would stall out in that oxygen-depleted atmosphere. It can't pull the G-forces necessary to evade a modern air-to-air missile. So yes, it's exceptionally fast, but it's also predictable. A target locked on a linear trajectory. The laws of physics are brutal. An airframe cutting through atmosphere at Mach 2.8 generates massive friction heat. The MiG-31 becomes a huge infrared torch, blazing in the sky. For modern electro-optical systems like the F-35's EOTS, or heat-seeking missiles like the AIM-9X Sidewinder, this is an ideal target. Detectable from hundreds of kilometers away. On radar, that velocity creates a massive Doppler signature, impossible to hide. Another weakness? Electronics. The September 19th operation demonstrated that the MiG-31's jamming and awareness systems are decades obsolete compared to NATO technology. That doesn't change at high altitude. With the revised rules of engagement, the next MiG-31 intrusion might not be intelligence collection, it might be elimination. And the weapons NATO would employ rely on networked integration, not solo platforms. Here's the breakdown. In aerial warfare, the MiG-31 might appear unbeatable at extreme altitude, but then a Gripen or Eurofighter Typhoon enters the engagement. These jets might be operating lower, 50 to 60,000 feet, like the F-35. They're receiving process targeting intelligence from the F-35. The pilot engages, but the weapon isn't conventional. It's the MBDA Meteor. The Meteor carries a solid rocket booster plus a ramjet engine, meaning it breathes atmospheric air for propulsion, generating thrust throughout most of its trajectory. After launch, the Meteor climbs steeply, a loft profile. While ascending to 80,000 feet, a conventional missile would exhaust energy, decelerate, but the Meteor's ramjet fires up at altitude, keeps accelerating, past Mach 4. When a MiG-31 pilot receives that missile warning, he faces two options: flee or maneuver. At Mach 2.8, he can't outrun a ramjet missile doing Mach 4+. The Meteor achieves roughly 4,900 kilometers per hour, sustains it. The MiG-31 at Mach 2.83 is traveling around 3,400 kilometers per hour. The mathematics are unforgiving. The Meteor's closure velocity is insurmountable, and maneuvering, physically impossible. Like we discussed earlier, thanks to its enormous no-escape envelope, the Meteor maintains energy and agility throughout its flight. For the MiG-31, it's an unwinnable scenario. The Meteor's operational range is 200 kilometers. In aerial combat, variables exist: launch geometry, aspect angle, all that. But in a head-on engagement, a Meteor can intercept and eliminate a MiG-31 traveling at high velocity from 100 to 130 kilometers distance. Even in the most challenging scenario, high-altitude stern chase, the Meteor can still engage the MiG-31 from 30 to 50 kilometers out. Another weapon is NATO's standard beyond visual range missile, the AIM-120D AMRAAM. This weapon poses significant danger to the MiG-31. Extended range, advanced motor, two-way data link. The AIM-120D can receive targeting updates from the F-35 or AWACS even during flight. Its motor accelerates it to roughly Mach 4, 4,900 kilometers per hour. It begins losing velocity near the end, but that massive velocity edge erases the distance fast, forces the MiG pilot into defensive actions, bleeds his speed and energy, makes him vulnerable to a follow-on Meteor or another missile approaching from behind. Inside the operations center at CAOCUEDEM, when those red symbols departed Estonian airspace and tracked east, there wasn't relief. There was controlled satisfaction. Russia's provocation hadn't just been stopped. It had been transformed into an intelligence bonanza. Russia's fatal error was assuming NATO's Baltic presence was purely symbolic air policing. What they actually confronted was a dynamic, lethal networked air defense, integrating multiple fighter generations from multiple nations through one unified network. Real-time data flow. What occurred in Estonian airspace on September 19th wasn't simply a successful intercept. It was an incident that fundamentally transformed NATO's defensive posture in the Baltics. Behind closed doors, tensions escalated. Representatives from Estonia, Poland, and Sweden argued forcefully. They claimed the traditional gentle escort approach was now interpreted by Russia as weakness. Russia understood NATO's engagement boundaries, and they were probing those boundaries without consequences. The September 19th operation proved technological dominance, but the next provocation could escalate lethally. With Germany's backing, a tougher proposal emerged: restore deterrence. This wasn't war declaration. It was sending an unmistakable signal about what the next violation would cost. After multiple days of intensive diplomatic and military negotiations, consensus formed on revised engagement protocols. The question shifted from will they try again to if they try again, can we actually eliminate them? Ultimately, NATO's strength isn't just technological superiority, it's a political message, announcing revised engagement rules, possessing the demonstrated military capability to enforce them. That fundamentally alters the deterrence calculation for Russia. The days of risk-free games are finished. The price of the next deliberate violation? Not merely a diplomatic complaint, but the destruction of billions in strategic hardware. Elite aviators. The cost-benefit analysis now overwhelmingly favors the West.